Welcome to episode 14 of The Coin Pod, a weekly podcast of conversations with people all around the world who use, study, and build Bitcoin. I'm your host, Zach Voll. Thanks for listening. For nearly 10 years, Bitcoin has been widely known as an experiment, something new, yet to be proven resoundingly successful, and very much in its early stages of development. Now, whether or not Bitcoin is still an experiment, the rivals of nominal threats to and vitriol for the project compound daily, and separating the inconsequential noise from potentially serious threats to Bitcoin is crucial. For this episode, I chatted with Giacomo Zucco about threats to Bitcoin, legitimate ones and bogus ones. To be honest, you'll need to buckle up for this episode as Giacomo unloads an unfair amount of incredibly important knowledge critical to understanding Bitcoin in light of naysayers and would-be rivals in the so-called crypto space. Without further delay, here's Giacomo. Thanks so much for taking the time to chat with me today. This should be some great fun.
Yeah, my pleasure.
So I really just wanted to pick your brain about the most important, most relevant, most concerning potential attacks or existing attacks on Bitcoin. Before we jump into that conversation, though, I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about your work with the BHB network and a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so that's changing a little bit while we are talking, so I will try to explain the last iteration of this situation. So about myself, I studied theoretical physics, and after university I started to work for a big company, Accenture, as a technology consultant. And then I started to get involved in Bitcoin and to study Bitcoin around amateurishly 2012. And then in 2013, I couldn't take anymore. I quit Accenture and I started to join and co-found little Bitcoin companies. So a mining operation in Switzerland, a payment company in Panama. I for a few weeks, I cooperated as a biz dev to Green Address Bitcoin Wallet along with my friend Lawrence Naum. And so I had a lot of fun. I didn't have my own project. I was just trying to get involved in many projects. Then in 2015, I started to believe that we are not yet in the startup phase of Bitcoin. We are still in the infrastructure phase of Bitcoin, in an R&D phase of Bitcoin. So I decided, instead of just running a project, to create a place in order to help boost and study all the advancements in the infrastructure of Bitcoin. So I created this foundation. That back then it hasn't this name, but it was the embryo of a BHB network, which was a no-profit foundation in order to basically give money and structures and places to be, an organization and logistical help to Bitcoin developers and Bitcoin researchers in order to boost the thing. And it started just like an incubator. The original idea was I will gather the startuppers and I will take equities and I will give them money. But actually it turned out that interesting stuff on Bitcoin aren't really startups. You know, there are a lot of good developers that are not launching their own startups. They are just working for free on the protocol. So those VC angel investor model wasn't really working. So we basically transformed the model. And on one side, I created a network of consulting companies that are consulting mainly financial incumbents or technology incumbents. So they do education and consultancy and strategy and support in understanding Bitcoin to banks and telco companies and big giants like that. They take the money and they give part of the money, part is profit, of course, for the investors, but part of the money is given to the no-profit initiative, which is BHB Network, and which has as a main goal to support development. So far, we basically, results, which are not mine results or BHB Network results, are just results of the developers, but we somehow helped, are the organization of Scaling Bitcoin Tree in Milan, the organization around the same days of the of the first Lightning Network meeting, where all the Lightning Network guys from different companies, from Lightning Labs and Blockstream and Async, they just gathered on the same table in our office, and I was just bringing pizza to them. Basically, that was my role, and we helped them just to gather together in order to boost the Bolt protocol that at the beginning was called the Milan protocol because it was conceived in Milan. Another example is when Peter Todd, which has been working with us in our office for many times, we connected him with Riccardo Casata, who was working on Eternity Wall, which is a notarization-focused startup, so a startup focused on the notarization side of Bitcoin, so proof of existence, proof of publication, and stuff like that. And Peter said, I have a standard for this. Like I did it in 2013. Now it just kind of abandoned it. So Riccardo and Peter and other guys together, they basically revamped the standard, which is open timestamps, which is now a de facto standard for the industry. It's the most advanced and most let's say complete standard for Bitcoin-based notarization. We are now working on a asset token protocol on top of Bitcoin. We are trying to work with hardware and stuff, mining research. So basically, BHB Network is doing research. Also, we sponsored for 3 years I would say the most important Bitcoin meetup in Europe. I think I could dare to say that the Milan Bitcoin meetup, which was it hosted every cool guy in the space from basically everybody, and it was very, very important. Also, one of the few Bitcoin meetup not took over by ICO craziness or altcoins. It was only Bitcoin since the beginning for 3 years without any kind of invasion.
Speaking of altcoins, though, that's almost a perfect segue into one of the most popular, even if fundamentally flawed, ideas that people think of when they think of a tax on Bitcoin. The idea that there will be some sort of new token or new coin or new blockchain that is being created right now or will be created in the future that can somehow beat out Bitcoin and be the next Bitcoin or a better Bitcoin or something like that. And you sort of resoundingly rebutted this idea in your phenomenal tweet storm on May the 1st. But I'm just curious if you could condense a little bit of that down for us in one of this first like threat to Bitcoin, that of an altcoin or something replacing Bitcoin. You said that you don't think it's a possibility, but even if it does happen, then you're fine with it because a better Bitcoin would be great. What is there to lose from that? Can you tell us a little bit on your more of your thoughts on an altcoin beating out Bitcoin? How you see this as an attack on Bitcoin or a potential threat?
Yeah, let's try to divide what Bitcoin is in three parts, in three pieces. One part is the idea, the goal, the purpose. The purpose is to have people exchanging value and storing value in a free way without interference by regulators, by big brothers, or by central banks. So the first thing is to resist the money manipulation, just like people were doing with gold, but people were forbidden to do that with gold. Many people do not remember it, but during the recession, Franklin Delano Roosevelt actually made illegal people were going to prison in the USA because they were storing gold to save their savings from inflation. So people want to save value from inflation of fiat money, but they cannot because the government is trying to censor any kind of alternative. The second is mass surveillance. So people would like just to pay without being spied upon or censored if they donate to WikiLeaks or if they buy porn or whatever. That they would just like to not to give to these payment companies all the information on themselves, and this is mostly the elaboration of the cypherpunk. I will urge people to read the Cypherpunk Manifesto of Tim May. It's a very good read. It was in the 90s. And so these two ideas that we want to be free from asset manipulation and we want to be free from surveillance and censorship of our transaction, just created the space where Bitcoin came from. And this idea, I think that it will be fulfilled by Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin will fulfill this idea completely. If I'm wrong, I think that unfortunately no other coin will be able to replace this role. And now we'll try to explain and to motivate a little bit why I think so. But even if I'm wrong, and so if Bitcoin cannot fulfill this promise, and if another asset will fulfill this promise, as an initial goal, I'm fine. We were here in order to have a censorship-resistant, permissionless finance payment storing saving system. If we have it without Bitcoin, I will get a little bit poorer, because I was convinced that Bitcoin was the thing. So I am also saving I also storing my savings in Bitcoin. Am I wrong? I will get poorer. No, I'm still young. I will work, and then I will earn the new Bitcoin 2.0. So Bitcoin is an idea. If I'm right, only Bitcoin, the protocol, can actually fulfill that promise. But if I'm wrong, there is no problem. So the fear of competition is never a reason in order to go fast and break things on Bitcoin. Because if my idea is right, then there is no rush. If my idea is wrong, then there is no rush, because we will just move to the next Bitcoin. So the second thing Bitcoin is a protocol. I do think that Bitcoin, the protocol, like the Bitcoin blockchain, is here to stay for many, many, many years, maybe decades, and it will not be surpassed or replaced by anything else. People is mostly misguided about this discussion, because they think about products, like proprietary products, like they say Facebook replaced MySpace, or the T-model car was replaced by other cars. But Bitcoin is not a proprietary product. It is a infrastructure level open standard. And when you are talking about products, the market tries to get competition, the most competition you can, so differentiation and fast evolution. While when you talk about infrastructure layer protocols, the market doesn't settle for differentiation and evolution. It settles for basically convergence and stability. Let's think about the internet. Just on May the 3rd, Tour de Mister published a very great tweet about a page of a book by Bill Gates. Bill Gates in 1995, he wrote this book, The Way Ahead, where he said, it's not about the internet. The internet is just the first application, and it's also old application. The internet protocol, TCP/IP, is from the 70s or even the 60s. So we have new stuff, and it's not about the internet. It's about the highway of information, which will include the internet maybe, but even other things like private networks and stuff like that. So this is exactly the same kind of discussion about people that before they were saying it's not about the Bitcoin, it's about blockchain, meaning private corporate blockchains. Now people is saying it's not about Bitcoin, it's about crypto, but crypto, like blockchain, like highway of information, are just ideas. Ideas usually need some kind of agreed upon public common standard in order to succeed. Internet is a very, very old protocol. TCP/IP version 4 is a protocol which is very, very old. It is from the 70s. It has never been changed at the fundamental level. It is not perfect. It has many, many problems. But still, the reason we keep internet is because we need a common, stable, and convergent layer that we can build upon with new things that will, unlike the base layer, the top layers will actually evolve, they will change, they will compete, they will differentiate, but the same layer has to be the same. Just me and you. I'm not a native English speaker, as you can understand from my accent. but we are speaking in English. I'm not speaking Italian because we would have an hard time to understand each other. And mostly when I am in conferences, I speak with people which is from German or Poland or anywhere, and we speak in English. And we use the Arabic number system or the Indian number system, and we use the Latin alphabet, and the market converge and is still converging in China. The Western alphabet is actually advancing. So things are converging when you talk about standards. Bitcoin is not a product. Even if there is the nice Bitcoin logo, Bitcoin is not a product. It is a standard. So it is a computer network, it is a proof of work network, and it is a monetary network. So for this reason, I think that basically it will not be possible to easily and in the next future to bypass this innovation to create another one. If you want to create the next internet, you don't have to create another internet which is slightly better. You have to create something which is orders of magnitude better, and you have to migrate all the world infrastructure into the new internet faster than the world is settling down on the old internet. So this is very, very difficult to do. I think that in the internet, TCP/IP version 4 will be replaced by another protocol, but it will happen probably in decades, and it is already decades old. So if Bitcoin the idea will succeed, probably Bitcoin the protocol will remain the standard, even if it's imperfect, will remain the standard, very difficult to change, very difficult to attack for a long time. Then, even if it changes, my further question will be, my further consideration will be, will it imply that we have to change asset too? So if we migrate to a new blockchain tech or blockchain-less tech, DAG or 3-chain or whatever, if we migrate maybe in 2040, the blockchain sucks and we want to migrate to something better as a whole, probably it will be 2090, I don't know. But even then, which is the reason to bootstrap a new coin, a new asset from scratch, instead of just leveraging the distribution and the economical bootstrap that Satoshi already had to do at the beginning? Because if you think about it, the immediate predecessor of Bitcoin, as an idea, as a concept, it was eGold. So it was a centralized company that was giving people the same feature of Bitcoin, basically anonymity, censorship resistance, and stability of price without manipulation from central banks. So they were just keeping your gold and using anonymous transaction of gold, but then they were shut down. They were shut down because they were centralized. That's why we came up with Bitcoin, which is better because it's decentralized. But the point is that if Satoshi Nakamoto could have just leverage the distribution and the value and the market liquidity and the market depth and the financial infrastructure of gold instead of rebootstrapping a new asset, for sure, Satoshi Nakamoto would have, I mean, I cannot speak for him, but I think it's very rational to assume that he will just have reused something existing like gold instead of bootstrapping a new asset. But you cannot use the physical gold into the digital asset, in the digital realm. So he had to bootstrap a new digital gold for the new digital realm. But if in 2090 we have to migrate from blockchain to something else, why can't we just reuse the same initial distribution? And I will close here my answer, which is already too long, but just pointing out that I don't know if it's okay as a format, but I tend to be a little bit talkative. Anyway, if so, the idea can succeed. If it succeeds with Bitcoin, good. If it succeeds with something else, good. But I don't think it will. The infrastructure will remain the same, probably for a very, very long time, and it will be unique with some appendix, but mostly unique, with layers on top. And if the infrastructure will be replaced, probably the financial asset will be the same and will just migrate. So Bitcoin will be Bitcoin, even because Bitcoin is characterized by two very, very difficult to reproduce features, which I talked about in my infamous tweet storm. So basically, first, what I call immaculate conception. Is many people was shocked by the religious terminology, but what I mean is that Satoshi Nakamoto was able to work in a context where nobody was, pardon my French, giving a shit about Bitcoin permissionless. I mean, Federal Reserves, NSA, the SEC, they were just a bunch of probably 15 or 30 nerds on a cryptography mailing list. Nobody was watching them. Nobody was trying to blackmail them. Nobody was trying to buy them off. Nobody was trying to compromise them or to infiltrate them. Like if you were inside the cryptography mailing list in 1999, probably the chance that NSA was infiltrating that was very, very low, because they were not accomplishing anything. They were failing since a decade to do the trustless money. So it was a very protected environment. And Satoshi Nakamoto, and also is not like the enemy is always only the state, which is organized crime. You also have unorganized crime, like normal scammers or normal hackers or normal attackers that just want to infiltrate in order to compromise your project. So if you had to bootstrap a new asset right now, after the huge change that Bitcoin made to history, all the eyes of the world will be on it, and you will have infiltration at the code level in time zero. Like the probability that we have backdoors in Satoshi client are very, very low, because everybody reviewed the code and it's the most reviewed code in the history. But if you start a new coin right now, somebody will try to compromise the developer group, the mailing list, the web domain. I mean, people knows what Roger Ver is doing with Bitcoin.com. I mean, if the new Bitcoin is going to be born, some Roger Ver will buy the new coin.com immediately, because they know that can leverage that. So this that I call immaculate conception is a situation in which Satoshi could gain trust in a very not adversarial environment at the beginning. It could build this trust. It could make changes to the code. It could make mistakes. Satoshi did a lot of mistakes in the first releases, and they corrected the mistakes without traumas, without drama, because they were few people, no money involved, and that grace period cannot be reproduced easily. If Bitcoin fails, there will not be a new immaculate conception, probably for decades and decades. You have to wait for the world to forget Bitcoin, and only then maybe you will have some new Bitcoin, more advanced, taking over. But it will take probably more than I would be allowed to see in my life. So this is the first argument. The second argument is that Bitcoin has to recreate digital scarcity. Scarcity is a very difficult thing to recreate in the digital realm, because in the digital realm you have information, and information can be copied and replicated and cloned forever, unless we go to quantum computing, which is another thing. In normal computing, you can clone information, so you don't have scarcity. So there is a very smart trick of using the physical scarcity of electricity using proof of work in order to create digital scarcity, producing basically the coin base from the proof of work. This is smart, but this assumes that people will give value only to put a cap on Bitcoin, 21 million, assumes that people will just consider Bitcoin, because if people is just using Bitcoin and infinite other Bitcoin clones, then your effective supply is infinite, and then the value of every single coin is zero. If you assume that infinite coins can win altogether, the value of each individual coin of this infinity is zero. Of course, there are middle grounds, like that there could be a Gaussian distribution, but basically the only way to have a strong guarantee, even if you have a distribution like Bitcoin cover this much of the value, and then there is Litecoin and that whatever, Monero. Even in this distribution, you cannot really predict the supply, because maybe tomorrow, maybe, I don't know, Monero I don't know how much Monero you will end to have, probably infinite, but let's assume that Monero are 40 million at the end, and Bitcoin is 21. How many coin you have, it depends of the relative market rate of the two. So this is a situation that right now is okay. But if it was long-standing, it will make impossible to predict the supply of the coins and thus the long-term value of the coin. It would be a terrible digital gold. So getting back, my theory, which is not just mine, it's we could say that it is the Bitcoin maximalist standard theory, is that you cannot recreate the Bitcoin asset initial conception because it's not possible anymore. And if you could, then it will basically destroy Bitcoin and every other Bitcoin clone, because there will not be a Schelling point anymore, a focal point. The economies go. Imagine that you can create with a philosophical stone, you can create gold, which maybe it's a little bit different because it's a different color, but it's still gold, and everybody will think of it as gold. Gold will just decrease in value and will become a shitty form of money because everybody will be able to create it. So this is the overall argument. And the nice thing is that even if my argument is wrong, it doesn't change the strategy. If I'm right, you have to bet on Bitcoin. If I'm wrong, you have to bet on Bitcoin.
I'm curious, though, because many of the hard-lining Bitcoin maximalists see altcoins and any Bitcoin fork as a malicious attack on Bitcoin. But some of the explanation you gave for why those altcoins and maybe, I'm assuming maybe forks also, you sort of see them as just irrelevant side projects that have no long-term value. They can't beat Bitcoin. It's just ultimately maybe a waste of time and energy for the developers that are working on them. Do you see all these altcoins and specifically Bitcoin forks as attacks on Bitcoin itself, or as just sort of irrelevant scams or spam or something like that?
So I'm not sure about this. That's why I tend to be a hardline maximalist, because I'm not sure. And in doubt, it's better to try to be hard and to put a cost into altcoining. But if I had to bet, I would bet that at this point, no altcoin can actually destroy the value proposition of Bitcoin. But since the risk, in my opinion, is not zero, the risk that Bitcoin fails just because the Schelling point, the focal point of the people of the game theory, just spreads against an infinite sea of altcoins, and so this thing just dilutes. I mean, if you have Bitcoin ETF and you have Bitcoin futures, the institutional money can start to buy Bitcoin, and the hackers can use Bitcoin permissionlessly, while the institutional guys will just pump the value for the FOMO. This is the hyper-Bitcoinization theory. There cannot be any hyper-Bitcoinization if you have Bitcoin future, but also Ethereum futures, and also any kind of coin that any pumper can came up with. It's an unpredictable future. It's like if instead of the internet, let's assume that in 1995, when Bill Gates wrote the book about the highways of information, let's imagine that the Soviet Union was had not fall down, and so they had their incompatible internet. They didn't want to use the American internet because it's American, and so you have part of the world that will use the internet and part of the world that will use the Soviet internet. The value proposition of the internet itself and its power against the private centralized alternative like AOL or whatever, or Apple Talk would be way less. So the success of, I consider the success of altcoins very unlikely, but if it happens, it will be destructive for Bitcoin and for altcoins. So I also think that they should be. It's a safe measure to stay clear and try to contain this phenomenon and try to. That said, I think there is a degree of scamminess. Like if you create, I think that the best way to produce an alternative, if you want to experiment, let's consider, for example, Monero. You want to experiment, Bitcoin's privacy sucks. It's very, very bad. We will fix it. We will make it better. But so far, it's very, very bad. So if you want to fix it, you want to create something else, but you cannot put ring signature or confidential transactions on top of Bitcoin because of obvious reasons. And so instead you create your own chain. That's probably, your chain will not win the market, but there are degrees of way to do that more and more in a more and more scammy way. So the more honest way will be to create a side chain. That means I will create this new infrastructure. I will launch a new infrastructure, but I will not launch a new digital gold. I will enable you to take your digital gold, put it inside my structure outside the Bitcoin infrastructure and back, so we can experiment and you can migrate eventually to a new infrastructure if needed. So we experiment with technology, but not with the new digital gold, which is the very difficult part to recreate. So if you cannot do that, and many people cannot do that because it's still very unclear how to do two-way side chains where you can just pass Bitcoin over and out. So you can just do something that nobody's doing, but I think it would be very, very ethical, which is a proof of burn. So basically, do you want to have a coin in this new chain that I created? Just burn a Bitcoin and you get a new coin. That will put a cap on the value of the new coin. That will basically, if you take value outside the digital gold, you also take the supply of digital gold out. So you basically compensate the economy of the digital gold, which is a better way to bootstrap your own economy and a less dangerous way, a less harmful way to clone Bitcoin. Then the step below that will be what now is called forking, which is just basically an airdrop. So instead of creating a new distribution from scratch, I will compensate people that was investing in a Bitcoin infrastructure and system, giving them one new coin for every coin. So I think that this is actually better than normal altcoin distribution. It's more fair and it's also more successful. I would suggest proof of burn for sidechain first, proof of burn second. If you cannot do a proof of burn, forking is better than creating from scratch. The problem with stuff like Bcash that we will discuss is that it's not a honest fork. It's a fork that is trying to steal is trying to sell itself as Bitcoin, to confuse people, is trying to scam people. So it's a dishonest fork. But if you do an honest fork, it is better than creating a new proof of work coin. Then the other layer is like Monero did or Namecoin did or Siacoin did. It's not so scammy. I don't think it will work long run. Hopefully, because if it did work, it will destroy Bitcoin. But I think that it's still kind of honest. Then there is the really scammy idea, which is pre-mine and ICO. So I'm not just rebootstrapping digital gold, digital scarcity, but I'm selling it to you, unlike Satoshi did. So I am leveraging the innovation of Satoshi, but I'm directly profiting with it, making it very centralized. And also illegal because it's a security. And this is like Ethereum did. This is like many ICOs did. And this is, I think, this is the lowest level of ethics in creating a new altcoin. Actually, the real lowest level is something like Bcash, where you create a new altcoin and you try to scam people, trying to steal the brand of Bitcoin, of the project, to steal the mind share of Bitcoin.
We are sort of approaching the time limit here for the episode, and I can't thank you enough for coming on and chatting with me. I do want to wrap up with one more question, hopefully a simple enough question to end the episode with, but looking forward to the next 2 or 5 or maybe 10 years of Bitcoin, what do you see as probably the most significant threat to Bitcoin's success, its continued development, its continued adoption over the next few years?
Yeah, I think that the most dangerous threats are social threats and not technical threats. So Bitcoin is most of all a social experiment. I mean, the game theory around Bitcoin, the scarcity of the token, the assumption about miners are all social economic assumption, not technical. So the tech of Bitcoin is quite sound, and I don't think we will have a technical problem with it. The social part of the social failure scenarios could be something similar to what I think that the most worrying is something similar to what happened with the internet itself, which is a partial failure. Like nobody tried to censor the internet. So the internet was a network that was built in order to survive atomic wars. So it was censorship resistant because it was inefficient compared to a traditional internal centralized mainframe, but it was very censorship resistant. But nobody really tried to censor internet. What that created a situation in which people adopted the internet because it was easily. It was socially scalable. It was an open standard that everybody could join, that nobody could easily stop. So since nobody can stop it, everybody uses it and it grows and it conquers the world. But since nobody is trying to stop it, people get lazy about the main vulnerable part, and we allow a lot of centralization. We allow centralization about internet service providers. We allow centralization about DNS and domain name systems in general. We allow centralization over packet inspection and stuff like that. So internet gets compromised a little bit. And when people do actually finally need the censorship resistance, for example, people in Iran or in Turkey, which are protesting on Twitter against the regime, or people who want to consume marijuana from the state of New York and not the state of Colorado, or people that, whatever, people who want to donate WikiLeaks, or people who want to go on Telegram or to use encrypted chat, or to download BitTorrent torrents. So you just want to watch, to exchange information, and now the governments, let's say, it's not easy to censor you, but it's also not that difficult because people got lazy. Like you should think also about BitTorrent. BitTorrent is great. It became a standard. 70% of internet transaction or internet traffic was BitTorrent at one point. And then people just started to settle with Netflix or SoundCloud or Spotify or YouTube or streaming website. That's fine because people will just follow the path of minimum energy. So that's normal. But if that happens, the result is that, a direct, immediate attack by the government will not take Bitcoin down. But if governments will refrain from attacking Bitcoin for very long, and people get lazy and they start to give up decentralization in order to have better performances, they want speed, they want comfort, they want UX, and they forget about decentralization. Then after maybe 10 years, when you really need decentralization because the new Franklin Delano Roosevelt want to steal all your Bitcoin or your digital gold. So now you need censorship resistant, and you have lost it because it was too easy, the context before. So I think this is the major threat. Then there are some minor technical threats that I think are mainly ASICs production centralization. People say that mining is centralized. Mining is not really centralized. And the good thing about mining is that if somebody tries to take mining down, the effect is to decentralize mining more. Because if you try to, let's say that the governments will ask to do KYC and AML on any transaction, otherwise the miner will be forbidden to mine it. That will just give a black market miner more advantage over a big, fat, not black market miner. So it's kind of balance itself. But ASICs production, the production of the chip, is so expensive and is so centralized that if governments go to let's say to Samsung and to global foundries and they say stop selling this shit to people to miners that do not comply with the regulation, that's very dangerous. Still, the market can respond. Like if you cannot produce chips, you can steal chips. We can do a Bitcoin crowdfund to steal chips from global foundries, but it becomes a little bit difficult to counteract that. So ASIC centralization could be a very scary problem, could be the defeat of Bitcoin, It's unlikely, but possible. I'm happy to see that there is more competition with Elon mining and Samsung directly taking part. I mean, when it was just Bitmain controlling 80% of the supply of ASICs, and also putting key switches on the ASICs and backdoors on the ASICs. So that it's not that Jianwu is a bad. I mean, it is bad, but it's natural, right? If you have one player controlling 80% of a multi-billion money system, if he's not bad himself, he will be forced to become bad by the next government to him. So it's natural. So these are, I think, the two major threats.
I can't thank you enough for coming on and recording this with me. This has been a phenomenal pleasure for me, and I can't wait to produce and release this episode. I would love to do this again sometime, and thank you again.
Well, since I was so long in my answers, the minimum I can do is to make a second episode about it.
This CoinPod has been a production of You, Me, and BTC. Special thanks, as always, to my colleagues Tim Baker and Daniel Brown, and of course to my guest, Giacomo. Please tweet at him and the show if you enjoyed this week's episode. And if you've missed any previous CoinPods, visit thecoinpod.com to catch up. Be sure also to follow at thecoinpod on Twitter to keep up with weekly episodes, and message the show with any questions after listening. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back next week. Until then, cheers.